the next speaker in our Illuminate Your Heart series. The evening with Ron LaPlace is coming up on April 11th, and it's called Awakening the Illuminated Heart. We're doing the interview on Zoom because Ron is not in Calgary, nor is he in Canada. He's actually down in Colorado. So welcome, Ron. I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you.
Thank you, Toriel. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really looking forward to being in Calgary.
You know what? Ever since you gave me this book, and I'm going to show this book, I have been almost ecstatic about talking to you and even more about you coming. So we're going to dive right into this. But before we get into the content of what's happening on the 11th, I want to learn a little bit more about you, and I'm sure everybody else would like to hear more too. So, who is Ron LaPlace?
Whoa, gosh. Okay, I'm on the spot. That's all right.
You are.
Well, I grew up in Calgary, and for the first 18 years of my life, I was absolutely, well, how do you say it? Absolutely normal. I had a relatively good childhood. I had great parents. I enjoyed my life, but there was definitely something lacking. To be perfectly honest, there were times in my later teen years where I was so disillusioned with what I saw in life, the fact that I wasn't seeing justice anywhere. And I was so disillusioned with that, I thought a number of times about checking out. I went as far as standing on the bridge and considering it. And at that moment, there was a little voice that came in. I had no idea that I had a little voice, but there it was anyway. And it said, "Why don't you wait a while?" And it was not long afterwards that a number of events happened, like they do for so many people, that changed my life. And the one that I can relate to just a few months later was a dear friend gave me a book. And the book was called The Third Eye by Lobsang Rampa. And it was really the story of Lobsang Rampa's early life. He, at 4 years of age, he entered a lamasery in Lhasa, Tibet. And in that book, I learned about things I had no idea existed, things like reincarnation, cause and effect, so many things that opened up so that I understood that there could be justice in an entirely different way than what I was seeing in the outer world. And after that, I went down the rabbit hole. And this was 1969. In 1969, the rabbit hole didn't include the internet. And there really weren't that many books that you could access that were going where I wanted to go. But things always seemed to show up in right divine time. And a few months after that, I was introduced to an organization that has a course of study in metaphysics. And that organization became very important to me. The organization is called the Brotherhood of the White Temple. And I entered their study of metaphysics and continued with that for decades. And the head of that organization, although he had passed away already, a few years before that. His name is Doreel, Doreal. And I'm going to give you just one brief explanation of a way of describing who Doreel was. Doreel was teaching in the very early 1900s. And so he was around in 1930 something, 32 or so, when Pluto was discovered. And at that time, Doreel wrote that at some point, humanity would understand that it wasn't just Pluto. There was another planet, and the two planets rotated around each other in their travel through space so that they formed a helix, just like DNA. And that was not really confirmed in an open way until just a few years ago when the New Horizons probe flew by Pluto and continued on out into even further in space. So that's just a little explanation that Doreel had a vast knowledge and an understanding that went beyond what you could call normal understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the beginning, and I had many events. I ended up building a log house in northern Alberta and powering that. It was the first solar powered home in Canada. And I made that into a business and did that for over 2 decades. And then later in the 1990s, in my 47th year, I had a book fall off the shelf, literally. And that book had a really strange name. The name was Nothing in This Book is True, but It's Exactly the Way Things Are.
Wow, never heard of that book.
It was written by a man named Bob Frizzell. And what he was describing for the most part in that book was a 6-day workshop that he took from a man with a very strange name, Drunvalo Melchizedek. Now, in that, I was introduced to sacred geometry in a major way. I had some connection to it before, but sacred geometry was really important for me. It answered so many questions, and it filled in so many spaces that were waiting to be filled in. And so very quickly, I realized I needed to connect deeper with what Drunvalo was teaching, and that was a class called The Flower of Life, and I ended up becoming a teacher of that. And I taught that from 1997 until 2011, when The Flower of Life morphed into something called Awakening the Illuminated Heart, and that's what I teach now.
That's incredible. So you sort of answered my next question already, but maybe there's a little bit more to the answer because I was curious about what attracted you to the work of using the principles of sacred geometry to help open the heart and to create a balanced relationship between the heart and the mind. That stood out for me when I was learning about you.
Okay. I guess the simplest way to answer that question, Toriel, is in the workshop, The Flower of Life, when I took it for the first time, I had an experience where it was necessary, in order to take the workshop, you actually had to watch the 6 days of video that of the class by Drunvalo that Bob Frizzell, in that book with the really weird name, wrote about. So I watched 6 days of video. And there I learned a lot about sacred geometry and many other things. And now, when I'm actually taking the workshop, I'm taking it from a facilitator in Sedona, Arizona, and something happened during that time where all of a sudden I had one of those aha moments where things clicked, and they clicked literally. I felt it this way. They clicked in my left brain, in my logical mind. I understood that through sacred geometry, I now had an understanding of the unity of all life. I understood it at that moment. And when that happened, there was an opportunity that hadn't existed before. The logical mind and the feeling mind, the emotional side of us, the right brain, until that moment, it really hadn't had an opportunity to come together, the two sides. When I understood the unity of all life in my logical mind, the right brain said, hey, I've been waiting. Here you are. And these two came together. And that was great. But something even more remarkable happened. I felt a doorway, a portal open from my mind to my heart. It was like an elevator. And at that moment, all of the knowledge, I'd been studying metaphysics, I'd looked at so many different aspects of life. All of it moved down and into the heart. And at that moment, I felt home.
Wow,
Yes.
that is incredible. I'm going to take you back one step because not everybody knows what sacred geometry is. So, can you give us a little simple explanation of it so people understand what you're actually talking about here?
Okay. I'll also say that if you go to my website, the www spirit tech, so that's the word spirit with TEC after
Mhm.
spirit, and then it's .com. There's a page on my website titled "What is Fibonacci?" And
Yep.
Fibonacci is a sequence of numbers. It's math, and it is one of the primary ways to gain a simple understanding of some of the aspects of sacred geometry. Sacred geometry is all around us. Sacred geometry is, we can approach it. I mentioned the left and right brain already. We
Mhm.
can approach it from either one or both. In the left brain, the mathematics of nature, the way nature grows, is all around us, expressing sacred geometry. And that is through what's called the Fibonacci sequence. And then the right brain knows beauty. When we look out, the artists and the architects in the Renaissance period were using sacred geometry. They knew about it. They would do their paintings in the proportions of sacred geometry. They would build their buildings in the proportions of sacred geometry. And the right brain recognizes that.
So, is it fair to say that when you align the heart and the mind, that you are in harmony and alignment with sacred geometry?
Absolutely. Yes. And it can be conscious or unconscious. It can be either one. So the mind and the heart both play a part. Yes.
Fantastic. So, I am curious because I believe there is merit to this question. Why is it so important, especially now, to do this?
Wow. That's a big question, and that's really why I do what I do. We live in a world that has been largely created in a certain way, because for the most part, it's the only way that consciousness in this world is aware that it can happen. And that is to create from the mind. And when we create from the mind, we are creating from an aspect or a part of us that lives in polarity. It creates in polarity, and polarity means just what it says. If you create one thing, if you put all your energy into creating one thing or a number of things, you are also creating their opposite. That's what polarity means. And we don't understand that. So some of us put all our energy into creating peace. And we don't understand when we all of a sudden from behind, we get hit with something other than peace. We focus our attention on something, and we do create it. And we also create its opposite. And there can be no other way when we create from the mind, because the mind is a polarized instrument. So the question must be, is there another way to create? And the answer is yes. When we connect to and enter a space in the heart that is not polarized, we can create from there. It is part of the unified field. It's never left unity. It exists within us. There's this saying from the Hermetic principles, the school of Hermes from ancient times. And one of those principles was, is as above, so below, as within, so without. Now, if that's a real principle, if that's authentic, what does it mean? If there is such a thing as unity, if there is such a thing as whatever you want to call that, God, spirit, source, if that exists somewhere out there, it must also exist within you. As above, so below, as within, so without. And so we have that as part of us. It's a seed that has lived inside, even though we forgot. And so when we go back now and begin to remember and begin to create from that place, we can create in unity. And for me, this is something that the world is on the verge of realizing and moving into.
I'm almost speechless, but I'm so excited about this because I agree with you. And the fact that you have the skill set, but also skill set doesn't even come close to explain what you actually do and what you embody when you do this work. That you have that and you can actually help people transform and transmute through the away from the opposition and into the unity is incredible. I want to go back to the evening of the awakening of the illuminated heart and ask what people can expect from the event. But before that, I also want to ask you, how has your life changed from this practice?
Wow. And it's not a hard question to answer. I'll do my best to answer it. The issue is more, how do you explain miracles? Because life is the opportunity in life is not for miracles. It's for what people think are miracles to become normal.
Wow.
When you are creating from the heart, things happen in such a way that there you can, if you want, work with attention and intention just as we would if we were creating from the mind. You can do that from the heart, or you can just let it be. And what I have found in my own life is the more that I let go and just let God, then life is a series of miracles, so that it's not a miracle, it is normal. Because it's allowed, it becomes a way of life. And I don't want that to sound in any way like I am something more or less than anyone else. This is, all of us have this same opportunity. And the heart opens the doorway to a movement that does change everything.
Do
And
you
so
have,
rather than talk about specific events, I think it is simpler to explain it that way.
that is beautiful. So if you were to say a few words about what people can expect that evening when you just do the first night, what would it be?
Well, I'm going to do my best on the evening talk to go deeper down what I explained just a little earlier about creation and how this way of creating when we move into the heart, uh, how deeply that affects not only ourselves, that's where we need to begin from, but it sets off ripples into life, into all aspects of life. I look at it as if we become islands in the stream, and the stream in this case is chaos. I'm going to show a video in that evening to begin with that is a video showing how sound affects fine particles when they're suspended on a plate above a speaker. And it's really quite amazing if you've never seen it before. When the pitch is changed on that speaker, these random particles form a beautiful geometry. And as the pitch is increased, then all of a sudden, at a certain moment, they go back into chaos. It's just random chaos until, as the pitch is increased a little more, a more complex and more beautiful geometry is formed. And that keeps happening over and over and over. And for me, that's a metaphor for life. Right now, when we look around out into the world, it may seem like chaos is everywhere. How would you know in that moment if all you know is that there's chaos? How would you know that you're just that far away from a moment when all of that goes back into a beautiful geometry?
I actually watched that video,
Mm-hmm.
and it actually made me think about the hidden messages in water.
Mm.
It's the same concept, and thinking that we are over 70% water, it's the very same concept that you are describing. And it was incredible to watch that and to know how powerful it is when your vibration aligns inside at a higher and higher vibration.
Yes. And
Yeah.
so we are indeed in the midst of a movement that's moving into a more complex geometry. Complex doesn't need to be a difficult word. What it means is that we move into a higher frequency where we understand the possibilities of life in a different way and start to move at a higher resonance with life rather than dissonance. And so we're so close to that. Using this analogy of islands in the stream again, what it takes is enough people finding this place in the heart and becoming their own island in the midst of chaos. When enough do that, it changes everything. And so the question becomes, how many does it take? And there are a lot of people who've looked into that. And that's another thing we'll talk about on the 11th of April. It's way less than you might imagine. And for me, the number that resonates is a number that Greg Braden has spoken of frequently, and that is 0.01%. That's what it takes to change consciousness. So go ahead, if someone's in their left brain, go ahead and work that out. Out of 7.5 or close to 8 billion people, how many is that? It's not that many.
80 million?
Yeah,
Something
is that
like
a
that?
lot? Yeah.
Not at all. I think we're well past that today.
Mm-hmm.
I think we are definitely a strong movement, and the more each and every one of us do, the more powerful we become in that movement to change consciousness.
Yeah.
Any last comments for the evening with Ron LaPlace? Or did we cover it?
Yeah, if you feel so inclined, we'd love to have you and join together in spirit. Yes, if that resonates, then please do. Yeah.
And I would add to that we absolutely want you to come. I think it will be a very inspirational evening. And we will also that night fill you in on what's up next with Ron, because he's going to stick around for a little bit, and he's going to do a 4-day workshop, April 25th to 28th. But we'll do another interview right after this and fill you in on the workshop. So thank you very much.
Should we say
And
where the evening presentation is happening?
yes, thank you for reminding me about that. It is at the Glamorgan Community Hall in Calgary. And the time, I believe we start at
7 p.m.
Is it 7 p.m.? I wasn't sure if it was 6:30 or 7. But the details are on our website, and we will add that to this video so you can get every little detail and come and join us. It will be amazing.